Right, so let's go over our first week. And in order to start that discussion, I thought I'd show you kind of what happens behind the scenes on this first submission when you submit your GitHub username here. And based on what I said in that video was about how the course is set up. And so when I'm looking at it here, I can see that I haven't done this step. And the reason I can see that is A, I don't have a check, and B, this is locked. So I'm just going to show you. Once you're in here and you've hopefully watched this video and I know there's a lot of information here. I'll give you a chance to ask questions in this week as well. So once you provide me your GitHub username and you hit submit, right? Now, depending on the time of day you do this, because you and I probably work at different times of the day. I'm a typical early morning, work through the day, off around 6 in the evening, and not back until the next day. So I'm hoping that many of you will come in a little bit early and do this first step, because it really just is a matter of understanding the way the course is organized by watching the video and giving me your GitHub username. But let me show you why I'm talking about timing. Because once you submit that, okay, and by the way, if I go back to home now, I can actually go and see, if I go to my grades, right, I can actually see that I submitted that first item. I was trying to see if it was actually a little more clear. I don't usually look at the student view, so that's interesting for me. But once I go in there, and let me just show you, when you submit that, I then go to GitHub, okay? And on GitHub, and this is me logged into GitHub and into our course organization, and I'll talk about GitHub in a minute just to give you a little more information about that. Then I will go into people. Now this is not something you would see. This is only because I administer the GitHub organization. That I will go and invite you, right? So whatever GitHub username you give me at that point, I will hit invite. And then you, in this case, will get an email to whatever email you use to set up your GitHub account, and then you will get an invite. And then I will come in here and tell you, hey, I graded that. Matter of fact, I'm just going to go ahead and for a second here, leave the student view, which actually takes me into the instructor view. And I would say, okay, so I invited that user, and I'll say, great, your GitHub username has been invited. Okay, so once I do that, right, and hit submit, then that means that I did that process. And this is why timing is important, especially during this first week when there's so much that happens. So now I'm going to come back in here, and I guess what I was trying to show you, and I'll switch back to the student view. Again, you don't have this option, but I want you to know it because there's many times students will reply to their grade with a comment, or I give them feedback, and we kind of have a little mini conversation in their grades. But I just want you to see, once you go and submit that, then what you can see here, I'm just looking for the way it's organized, week 1 attendance. Oh, sorry, that's why it's not on there. I was like trying to look for it and realize that actually because it doesn't have a due date, that's why it was down here in the bottom. So if you scroll, now for you, actually I think I'll fix this to actually have it show up at the top. But once you come in here, then you will see my comment. And once that happens, what you can do is, go check that email. Or the other option you have, and this is why I was honestly showing it, was in this first item in week 1, which is your attendance item, which is the item that you're watching the video from now. I kind of give you that backstory, and I give you a link to the GitHub organization that you've been invited to that I just talked about. So if for some reason, that's my point, if you didn't see that invite, but I told you I invited you, just go in here, click here, and then when it takes you to GitHub, because this is actually what we call a new tab link, and then it'll give you a message saying, hey, you've been invited, would you like to accept it? And you can say yeah. That's important because the next 2 items need you to have that development environment. You'll set that development environment up. Matter of fact, let's just look at that before I jump into the next piece. So when I was laying out this first week, I originally had this setup development environment as part of the first item of the semester. And I decided to actually make it as part of two items due on Thursday night. But I would definitely recommend, and you probably have heard me say this in attendance, is actually you go ahead and get this part done for a variety of reasons. And that way, when you get here, you're good to go. But if you wait, and I guess that's my point, is if for some reason you don't get to attendance, because I get how the beginning of the semester can be like that, then you may be kind of scrambling, especially if you're waiting until later, because again, timing is important here. For you to actually get this done, because you cannot do this item or this item without being in the GitHub organization. Okay, so hopefully I've gone over that enough to help you understand. So now, just because this is an important part of our class, when we're over here and you've been now at this point, right, you're in GitHub, you've been invited, it's important to understand there's a difference between Git and GitHub. Okay, and I actually have an image here. And I talk about this a little in the setup, but I want to just cover it here. So Git is software that we use for version control. Now it talks about it's installed locally, but I'm actually going to talk about this because we can use Git out on the cloud. So that's where it's where it gets a little muddy or a little maybe gray. But in this case, it tracks changes to your files. So this is an important process for anybody that's learning to code, is both how to understand the difference between Git. So in this case, Git is where we host the repositories, and these you'll basically call repos, right? Repos are basically folders with a bit more, because the software in the folders themselves and all the files that are there are version controlled. And version control is an important thing in this class because it's the way I grade. I grade on your commits, and you'll learn more about that in the next item. Now this is cloud-based as far as GitHub. And we have a web interface, okay? So just understanding that Git is software, GitHub is a website, it's cloud-based. Just to have that context in your brain as far as what we're going to do next, okay? Because what you're going to do next in the next environment in here is you're going to set up a development environment. Okay, so generally what this means is you know, in the past, this has kind of been exclusively local, right? And so I have another image for that. So typically when we set up development environments, and I have kind of been doing this for the last, several years, and I generally recommend all students set up a local development environment. Now, the other way you may hear this is on-prem or on-premises, which I think is not totally accurate because, you know, if you have a laptop, it's not on the premises. Might be sometimes, not all the time. It's a term you may hear as you're moving into the IT industry, on-prem, on-premises. But it's basically local to wherever you're at, that you have that development environment set up. So in this case now, I'm going to give you another option, right? So you can either set up the local, and I will give you instructions for both. But you can either set it up locally in your own system, your own laptop. Now, in this case, you could do it on Windows, you can do it on Mac. If you have a Chromebook that's relatively new, it supports containers. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But I've done it on Chromebooks. They just have to be newer. If you have questions about that, let me know. But this semester, I'm going to give students an option to do it, at least on this first week or so, on the cloud. And the reason is I want to make it as easy as possible for students to get started, because not all students in this class are going on to be web developers. You might be taking this for a variety of reasons. You might just tick off one of your requirements. And just FYI about why I actually had a couple students over the last year need an option like this, and I used something else. But now, because Microsoft is offering it up to educators, I can provide or enable this for us. Now, there is a bit of a caveat here, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so what is a development environment? It's basically, in our case, I'm going to recommend VS Code. Now, if you're using cloud-based, it should say there, you have to use VS Code. If you're local, I recommend VS Code as well. But if you are already, some people, once they get used to, we might call it an editor or an IDE, they kind of just love that and they don't want to change. So, I don't absolutely enforce as long as you know how to do all the stuff that we're going to do in this class as far as using Git and pushing code from your local to the cloud, you're fine. Okay. All right, so you have an option here, right? You have an option, and I'll go over in a minute just, what the instruction looks like next. So, but I want you to understand the following is like, and this will be probably, and this is kind of like my last thing, which one? Which one will you choose to set up? And your question may be to me, well, Rio, which one should I? And the answer is individual, right? So in this case, like, why would I decide? As a matter of fact, I just can't handle it. I'm going to have to actually leave this and fix instead of web-based. This should say cloud. When should I select a local development environment and when should I select a cloud? So here's kind of my general suggestion. And now I'll go back to the student view. If you're somebody that this is your major, and maybe you've taken my CIT82 class, which is Introduction to Web, right? Maybe you've already taken it or you're concurrently taking it, right? Because if you're taking that class, I have you do the local install in week 3. Although I am rethinking that one a little bit as well. And just having the experience to know how to install and set up a command line or to use command line on a local system is a good idea. The other thing is, if you're going cloud-based, it's going to be a little bit quicker to do the setup. You will then be more dependent on the your internet connection stability here. The thing about using the cloud in this case, because of Microsoft's giving it to us, and I should say air quotes free, is there is a limited number of hours. It's like 3,000 hours for everybody in here, but I'm thinking not everybody will select it, and actually I'm teaching database class and all of them will be doing it. So it'll be an interesting test to see if we even touch on the number of hours. Now what that means is the number of hours that you are running this cloud-based environment. So just to be clear too, what this means is, like, of course this is on whatever local system you have, but in this case we're going to use something called code spaces. And code spaces is basically a cloud-based computer, virtualized computer, that is then where you will code. So it's your coding environment in the cloud that you will then push, your code to GitHub, because all the way you submit code, submit classwork, is through GitHub, okay? But this is just a great feature to be able to spin up a development environment, and now it will save your work. You'll learn a lot more about this in the next item, as you will. Matter of fact, a lot of it overlaps between the two. So now let's actually, before I jump to the instructions, which one should you choose? Really, it depends on you. But I would tell you for this first week or so, choose one or the other. And if you're not comfortable necessarily doing command line, if you've never done it, you're still going to do it out on the cloud, but it will be quicker to set up. And there may be reasons, even if you do it local, later in this class you may actually be somewhere and you need to code something and you don't have your local computer, and you might use this. Where that would be a little more just making sure you understand is the difference between, once you code in the cloud, you need to actually push that code into here. And then once you do that, once you push it to GitHub, then on your local install, you'd have to pull that code into there. Now, I'm not going to cover that here, but I'm just telling you that's a little bit of a gotcha if you end up with both, is making sure you keep them in sync, because ultimately where everything needs to end up is on GitHub. Okay. So before I go over that on this post, right, tell us which option you will select for your development environment and why. And then also, it's a great time to ask any questions you may have about what I covered in the start here or in this item as well. So on this one, now I'm going to go ahead and say start the assignment. Oh, actually, this should be a discussion. Yeah, I don't have it set up. All right, I'll have to fix that. So that will be a reply and a discussion that you will do. Okay, so ignore what I'm about to do here, because I realized just now I had the item set up incorrectly. So once you do that, now let's go look at the next item, right? Once you reply, and by the way, it's always good to also, the attendance is a great time to ask questions and to interact with other students. We generally will have some items that are only submitted. Matter of fact, you can see the icon here. This is a pen with a paper. This is something that just gets submitted to me versus a discussion. Okay, so now let's end by looking at my instruction for setting up the dev environment. So in this case, the video, like I have it first broken down. You can see the due dates, right? I have it broken down into what pieces, even if you've selected local or code space, you need to do. Again, this video right here is from a year ago. Still relevant, but I go over some of the information I may have covered here, so you'll see some duplicate. But everybody, no matter which option you choose, needs to do this first step right here. Okay, that's why I have it laid out this way. Important to follow my naming conventions. And then if you're doing local, then you'll want to start here and install VS Code and Git. I do give Mac students a way to get that to have Git local because that can a little bit of a stumbling block for the Mac, but it's pretty doable. And then there's the video for that. And so I walk you through, again, this is all for the local folks, setting up a folder where you then will have those repos and these videos to help you with that. But if you've selected the code space, then you scroll down. So you don't do, right? So once you get this first part done, step 1, and you see step 2, then this is where you've selected which option you are going to do. If you're doing cloud, just scroll down until you see, in this case, cloud / code space is that cloud computer that I've been talking about. And in this video, I go over how to set that up. I did notice something I did in the video, so make sure you read this because of the way I showed how to start what we call the cloud your spin up of your development environment and the way I got back into it. So just check that out. Okay. So now once you do that part, so at this point you're coming back together. So now, and this, again, this is why I'm going over it here. So no matter what option, well, I should say this, the cloud folks don't need to do this piece. Only the local folks do. Okay. But everybody, this is the most important thing you learn. Then this is really about how you do that version control to then push your work, which is the final step. So we get a git status. It tells us the status of our environments. We add, what we call stage these changes into your, now this is called local, but I should say, I'll modify this, say local or cloud, because these commands are still things you're going to do on the cloud as well. And then you do git commit. So what you do is you commit your work with a message. Now when we get into working in this class, you will see I will have specific places in your coding and specific messages you'll be using. So understanding and getting this experience here is really important for not only the next item, but everything we do in this class. So trust me, in my guess, week 2 at the end, you'll be much more comfortable with this process, and that video is what's there. And then I show you what you need to submit. I go over that in here. So because, and this is what the reason I'm showing you is because I've only added this cloud option with code space this semester. I've updated the content, but in these other videos I hadn't done that option yet, so I know it can be a little confusing. I just wanted you to give that. So if you see something with FA23 or Spring 24, know that I haven't been talking about code spaces. But going forward, and I actually do this on after the next item, because the next item will actually be you then doing and by the way, it shows here, I can't get into it. Now you'll do the who's in the house, and this will be done because there's 2 repos you set up for this course. So you'll get to do that, and then this will be a discussion in that. Okay, so coming back here. I hope this gives you a good overview of this week. I hope you now have a sense of now the experience. Again, we'll modify this because this will be a reply. And like I said, if you have any questions regarding anything I've covered, please ask it here and I will try to be as timely. And if you see somebody else asking a question that you know of, check that out as well. Like, it's really helpful to actually answer questions. It actually helps us learn as well. All right, I'll talk to you later.